When my friend Sean asked me to be the best man at his wedding, I knew that I'd have to give a speech. So I asked my mom for advice on how to write one. And I'll never forget what she said to me. She said, "Daniel, it's a toast, not a speech. No one wants to hear you talk." Here's me talking. John Gennaro, count me in.
1, 2, 1, 2, 3.
Today's first words came from my sainted mother, Pat Devine, but the rest of them come from me. My name is Dan Devine, and this is the first episode of Devine Intervention, a self-help podcast about basketball. Before we get rolling, 3 things that I am grateful for today. 1, I get paid by Yahoo Sports to write about the NBA and talk about it into a microphone and this camera. 2, Joe Mandy's award-winning comedy special, which I watched last night again and is just absolutely hilarious. I would say he's a friend of the program, but I don't actually know him. Joe, reach out. Let's talk Timberwolves. And number 3, I get to have a chat with a distinguished guest who I also count as a dear friend. Joining me today, acclaimed writer, podcaster, creative titan, whose recent projects include the Amazon Freevee show Primo, the Hulu film Miguel Wants to Fight, who's about to make his debut for Marvel Comics, if you ever heard of it, and whose mantle features sports Emmys for the legendary series NBA Desktop, partially due to me appearing on it. Thank you very much. Now he's back behind the microphone, co-hosting Wondery Media's new weekly NBA podcast, 6 Trophies, with the great Shea Serrano. Friends, a warm welcome for Jason Concepcion. Jason, it's good to have you on Devine Intervention's first episode. How are you?
It feels great to break the seal.
It always does. It always feels good to break the seal.
It feels so good to be the first love bullet ejected from the barrel of Dan Devine's creative heart. It feels wonderful. It feels so good.
I thought you were going to go to Love Gun and we were going to start talking about Kiss for a while, but that's okay.
Yeah.
We can go this way too. That's perfectly fine by me.
Dan, it's so great to be here with you. Thank you for having me.
Well, we're having you here today, first just to catch up, but also I want to give you the opportunity. We had Shea Serrano, ever heard of him, on No Cap Room with Jake and I on Thursday. We're talking about the new podcast, 6 Trophies from Wondery Media. This is an opportunity. I want to make sure I heartily recommend it to all of our listeners and viewers. Please give us the elevator pitch, the conceit for the show, because it's a phenomenal one, and I want to make sure we get it right.
Sure. 6 Trophies is a podcast hosted by myself and 4-time New York Times bestselling author Shea Serrano, in which we discuss the week's NBA news, and we hand out 6 pop culture related trophies for 6 basketball related activities. And it's a really fun way to talk about the NBA. It's, as you, I'm sure, know, when somebody hands you the keys to your very own podcast to talk about something you love, it's one of the great scams.
Terrifying. I'm sorry.
It is terrifying. And it's just a fantastic heist. It's a wonderful way to get money from people and talk about something that you love with someone you are inspired by or admire. And it's really fun and fantastic. And I hope you all listen. New episodes drop every Wednesday, wherever you get your podcasts. I believe that there are special things for people who subscribe through the Wondery app. And I forgot what they are, but I'm here to try and, just grind a little bit for our corporate partners who've been so wonderful to us.
Well, the best way to find out what those special offerings are is, of course, to, I believe Wondery Plus, you subscribe, you're in the Wondery app. You want to make sure that you are getting as much possible content as you can from Shea and Jason on the 6 Trophies experience.
You can't spell Wondery without one, W-O-N. And that's
O-N-E.
what you're going to... Also O-N-E. You've got both versions of one there, and you're going to be oneing if you subscribe through Wondery Plus, or the Plus, as I like to call it.
I can't understand why you love to call it that, because it's a good name. Jason and I are here to talk about a number of things today. We're different in many ways, but we do share a specific source of psychic pain and torment and hurt growing up as fans of the New York Knicks.
Yes.
And we're going to explore that a bit today. Devine Intervention is a place where we can explore these big feelings. But first, Jason, if I may, I'd like to offer you a trophy.
Thank you.
You actually have 2 really impressive ones behind you, so this isn't going to be as impressive as that. But this one is the Stephen Curry, Steve Kerr playing with joy trophy.
Ah.
And why you get it, I'm going to let you provide the answer for that, because I want to know, Jason, what's something about basketball that's giving you joy this week?
Just that it's starting. I'm just a sucker for this sport. I'm a sucker for the New York Knicks. As I've been telling, people have been like, "Are you happy with what the Knicks have done this offseason? They didn't do, Dante DiVincenzo and most of the moves around the margins. Other teams getting better. The Bucks and the Celtics getting much better. Are you happy with?" Yes, I'm extremely. I got excited for a team that was starting Marty Collins. You know what I mean? Like that. I talked myself into that team. I don't have to talk myself into this team. And so I'm very excited that the season is starting and that I get to watch what I am actually really confident will be another Knicks playoff team. Another Knicks playoff team. Something that could not be said for much of the past 20 years. A back-to-back playoff appearance for the New York Knicks, who I fully, again, am confident will be just a good team, a good playoff team, a regular good team, no drama. Well, there's some drama, but not on the court, and just like a regular, solid, not really inspiring, but good team. I think that's great.
So that was going to be sort of my question to you, because there's these poles of Knicks fandom experience, right? And I guess in sort of our modern era, the age that we've the most recent age of this, you can maybe bookend it, say like the low ebb is something like, I don't know, say like Truck Party, right?
Yeah.
Like there's that's
for those of you, should we provide the context, or should we just let people? I think let people Google it.
Yeah, do your Googles on Truck Party. It's a lot of fun. Not that fun. Anyway, it depends on which seat you're driving from. But so maybe a low ebb of excitement and positivity there. Higher ebb, you could say, I don't know, like, Linsanity as an experience, or the cool Woody moment, the 50 plus win Mellow at the fourth season. So if we accept those as the poles of emotional experience with the Knicks right now, where are you on that sort of spectrum? Are you all the way at Linsanity, cool Woody, or are you sort of maybe more in the middle?
There's less a feeling of being loved bombed than there was with Linsanity. Felt like the first 2 to 3 weeks of a torrid relationship, where you're just like, I can't believe I want to spend all my time watching this team and talking about this team and texting about this team, and I can't wait till I get back to my television so I can watch this team. It's not quite that, because that was tinged with the feeling that many of those those kind of early relationships are tinged by, well, this can't last, right? This can't.
Right. When's the other shoe going to drop?
Yeah, this can't keep. It can't keep going like this. But this Knicks team, it feels like it can keep going like this. They can continue to be the 6th, 5th, 4th, perhaps 3rd seed in the East for the next several years, changes notwithstanding. This is just a solid, good team. And again, like back-to-back good seasons. First of all, good seasons have been so rare.
Right.
Over the last 20 years. To do them back to back has legitimately really not happened. I mean, you could, there was those 3 playoff appearances 10-ish years ago. But even those felt very tenuous. We're on much more solid footing. There's a real fine core of talented players. And I think moreover, the management is just smarter. So I'm not like, I don't have that like insane, like, oh my God, everything, I need to like imbibe everything about what the team is doing right now and where they are. And oh my God, is Jeremy Lin like sleeping on a couch? Like but I just feel like very confident. Like I'm sitting shotgun in a car that's taking a road trip and the driver is just very sensible. And that's how I feel.
It's good to have that kind of comfort, and you can understand. I think you're absolutely right. So you look at it and say, what from last season was like above its head that could not be replicated, and you maybe be tempted to say, well, Julius Randle might not make All NBA again. He was that caliber of player 2 seasons ago, right? You'd say maybe Jalen Brunson. I think that's maybe a sticking point and a concern for some people. Like, was that the start of an ascent, or is that like kind of where it tops out at? But also, if that's where it tops out at, and you've got a significant supporting cast around him with shooters and other guys that can play, maybe that's a pretty good place to be.
Yeah. I mean, you have to think, okay, are we going to be a historic offense again this season without, right? Maybe that'll come down a bit, though we've added shooting, and that would be welcome. And you hope that some of the young guys, Grimes, et cetera, who you've invested time in, can provide that for you. But overall, it just feels like you look at the team and you go, yeah, we can do that again. We can do that again. That's replicable, which is not a thing that I felt looking at previous good Knick teams, right? That have, the 2012-13 team that won 54 games. Everybody on that team was 40 years old. So you looked at that team and you felt like, hey, great season, but Jason Kidd is our starting off guard or whatever. Like that, we can't keep doing this. And not the case with this team. It feels really good. It feels wonderful. How do you feel about him?
This is one of those things where, we've talked about this before, like you have to try to wear different hats, right? And you're like, you're in the context of trying to be the dispassionate observer for it. I've given that up a little bit because I'm like, joy is so hard to come by in life broadly in different contexts. So like, if you can find a little bit of that in this team that you grew up liking, and that you can experience them a little bit as you go along, like grab it with both hands and don't just like try to find the reasons why regression to the mean is going to come for it. Like enjoy the progression or whatever, enjoy that moment. I think it's reasonable to look at it and say, there is an opportunity for, sustainable growth here. There's an opportunity for, if Randle, I think that Randle's the big question mark to me when we talked about this on No Cap Room. It was like, is he the most sort of like underrated good player or overrated bad player? Like, where does he sort of slot in there? I'm a little concerned about the Skechers situation. I'm not going to lie to you. But I will say, I don't know if I should feel more or less worried about. I mean, he caught a body in him the other night.
Yeah.
But Embiid's about to wear him. But does that make you feel better or worse about it?
Well, I think Embiid is a guy who I think knows the value of comfort, and I think in that sense, he's the perfect guy to rep Skechers. I think you hit it on the head with Julius. He's kind of like a reverse Jamal Murray, where in the regular season, he's just wonderful and killing it. And, minor moments aside, providing the kind of steady performance that the Knicks need on a night-to-night basis. And then it's in the postseason where you're like, I don't know what we're going to get. And honestly, if that's it, if he's a solid regular season guy, a very good player in the regular season, who maybe for whatever reason gets a little bandy-legged in the postseason, I'm fine with it. I'm okay with it. That's okay. He's, in other words, not a superstar, which is a thing that I think the front office understands and is looking for actively by all reports. And that's fine. They've done the thing that I think was really important for the Knicks to do, which is change the narrative around this team that it's a fucking dumpster fire that is just like on tour, like around the nation all the time, showing you what a mess it is. They very smartly said, okay, let's just be normal for like 3 or 4 seasons and watch how the Garden explodes. And that's exactly what has happened. And now the narrative has shifted a little bit where you're like, actually, you know what? Why not New York? They're good. And look at these people going crazy for, players who would probably be the second or third best player on a really good team. What if I come there and be that best player?
Well, I mean, you clearly would jump in at the top of the pecking order, no doubt about it. 7'3" with the vertical leap you have, it's no doubt about it. But you're absolutely right to say, like, you've created this collection of guys with, Emmanuel Quickley and with Quentin Grimes and, to be able to build out the depth and, bring in Josh Hart, you add DiVincenzo. There's like, you're not going to have to play bad guys. And as on a base level, like, that has not been true of most Knicks teams of my lifetime. Like, wait, all these guys are pretty good.
They're pretty good. It turns out when you have a roster of pretty good guys, like plus NBA players, your team's pretty good.
But that thing where you mentioned is like they've turned into a normal team. Like, I cannot overemphasize how dramatic a shift that is, and how like there was some semblance of the fan base, and always, into the back page tabloid kind of culture that was like, you have to win the press conference, you have to win the back page. Who is the savior that is going to come in and overhaul everything? And for years, there was just a segment of the fan base that said, like, what if though, but normal? Just do basic, simple things and be like a little bit better year over year and put a sustainably watchable product on the court, and not just like hope that LeBron's going to come or whatever. And then it actually happens. And you mentioned the relationship component of the analogy with the Lynn situation. Yeah, I'm like, well, okay, when do I find out that actually she's like cutting up all my clothes behind my back, and that like secretly this has been I've been getting slightly poisoned with ground up glass every day for the last 2 years, and I'm just gonna burst. Yeah, like, when is that coming? But so all of that to say, while we are excited about things and why it's reasonable to appreciate and embrace your excitement, it's also reasonable to name and acknowledge your fears. So, Jason, what about this Knicks team frightens you?
Well, it's the thing that I think has been the kind of either the Scylla or Charybdis of past Knicks teams.
I knew we were going to get to Scylla and Charybdis in the first episode of this podcast. I knew it.
Which is this ambition to acquire the star, the savior, the person. And I think one thing that is notable about this current Knicks regime is that they've retained that passion to get that guy or collection of guys. But they've said, okay, but let's do it smart. What if we did that but smart? What if we still were hunting around for the star? Donovan Mitchell, Karl Anthony Towns, Joel Embiid. But we did it smart. Now, you might say with Donovan Mitchell, they got lucky into the smart thing, which is they set a limit on what they were going to offer. And they said, we're going to stay here. Now, that limit, by all accounts, was predicated on the idea that they had the best offer, which they didn't. So they were kind of waylaid by the fact that they then lost the player. Turned out to be a good decision. And I guess what I'm saying is my fear is that they will lose that self-control and overpay, a classic Knicks foible, over trade, put too many things in a deal for the guy, whoever that guy might be, Karl Anthony Towns, the most recently named, and that will gut the team, the wonderful vibe, the energy that's kind of been flowing through the squad over the last, season and a half will suddenly be gone because those guys will be gone. Here comes the pressure. Team wilts under the pressure. New guy can't deliver under the intense glare of the tabloid gaze, and everything falls apart and we're a joke again. That's what I fear.
Well, first off, I now have a certain amount of tightness in my chest after hearing you go through that. But it's also, it's instructive to go through that, because what you're doing is, or what you're saying is like, I'm worried about falling back into bad patterns, right? I'm worried about like, this is it. There's scar tissue that's built up from years and years of the same kind of, Lucy yanking away the football kind of thing. And it feels like we're making real progress, but all it takes is like the one thing to set you off. And then all of a sudden you're going to fall backward. And I think it's a reasonable concern. One that adds to that to me is like, Tom Thibodeau has been, everything they could have asked for in terms of.
Sorry.
No, it's
every
great.
Time I hear his voice, I hear his name, I have to make that sound.
It's strong impression work. and he has been exactly what they could have asked for, like establish a style of play, establish a culture, establish a sort of baseline to jump off from. And we're also going into, I believe, the 5th year of it. And that's where things don't always go so hot for your man Tibbs. It's where things fell apart in Chicago. It's where things blew up pretty, catastrophically and like spectacularly in Minnesota. And so a concern that I have, a fear that I have going into it is when I think back to early last season and where the Evan Fournier experience was still rolling forward, this was like an under 500 team, 20 or 30 games of the season or whatever it was, and then caught the vibe and caught the feeling and kept moving. And it's like, well, all right, is he the guy from the last 50 games and everybody feels happy enough about it to carry it forward? Or is it like he was one bad road trip away from being fired right before everything got good? Is that kind of coming back around?
I'm going to inject some hope into this because I agree with you.
Please do.
We were at the kind of historic junction point in Tibbs' career, when you look back at these different spots. But things were different, right? In Chicago, he had a veritable clown car of executives above him, either throwing obstacles in his way or doing things that didn't make sense. And that kind of group of people has later been exposed to have been, in fact, a full big shoe, honky nose collection of veritable clowns in the traditional French clown fashion, like historic clown, circus clown type movers and shakers. And then in Minnesota, Tibbs was part of this kind of movement at the time where I think there was a recognition, okay, our execs can be clowns sometimes. So what if the coach was the exec? What if you gave Doc Rivers and Tom Thibodeau the keys and you said, do it? Now and all those obstacles are demolished and you can make the moves that you want to make and build the squad that you want to build the way you want to build it to play the type of style that you want to do. And it turned out that was actually really stupid too, because those two jobs are really, really hard. And what I'm saying is I think Tom has learned. I think he's evolved. We're learning and we're evolving people. We don't stay static. That was bad. That didn't work because that's just too much to put on one person's plate. Now in New York, he's got an executive regime headed by his former agent, a person that he trusts. So there's that feeling of communication, like, hey, I can tell this person what I'm looking for in a player, in a collection of players, and they understand me. They understand where I'm coming from. They understand what kind of coach I am. But also, there's that standing where that person can say, Tom, no, we're not going to do that.
Yeah, guardrails and boundaries.
Yeah, we're not going to do that. Okay, I have a plan. We have a plan for the team, and when those ambitions align with yours, we're going to do that, obviously. But we have to keep the long view in sight. And I think that has worked. That really seems to have worked. And Evan Fournier, who has been in a wonderful French doghouse for the past several months, has appeared in the preseason and is killing it. It has a very movable contract. The fact that Tibbs has been like, go ahead, show us, like, get out there. Like, I know that you're upset. You're a competitor. You're upset. I understand that. Go out there and show it. But that Thibs can also come back. This is not like Mike D'Antoni benching Nate Robinson for whatever it was, 18 straight games and nobody quite understanding why. Right. This is not that. This is, hey, look, we started winning, man. Like, right. Look at all the stats. So you can point to that and still acknowledge that Evan's upset. And that's positive. That shows growth in the previous kind of, from the previous kind of like Tom Thibodeau moves and the way he would go about things. And I think there's reason to hope. There's real reason to hope that Tom has evolved and that the structures in place have allowed him to evolve.
And I think just to put a button on this, if Tom Thibodeau can evolve and grow,
yeah,
and move from that growling, snarling monster that Jason just embodied so effervescently and so effortlessly into somebody who can have a more communicative relationship, can trust others and enable them to trust you. I got to think there's hope for all of us, including Knicks fans who are some of the most psychotic people on this or any plane of existence.
Yeah.
So listen, Jason, from your lips to God's ears in terms of the way that we can move into this season with high hopes and full hearts, but we're going to move from Knicks talk before we get mired into the dumps into a quick game, fill in the blank. It is exactly what it sounds like. I will present you a prompt. You fill in the blank. We have a conversation if you want to have it. We move on from there. First up, the young player, say second or third season max, who is most likely to make the leap this year is?
I really like Sengun on the Rockets. He made a real leap in his second year. It's just it has these flashes of, oh, you look like you've been playing for a long time, veteran type feeling about him, and I think that will continue in his third year. I also like Cade Cunningham. Like, I think healthy coming back. Cade was surrounded by, you really like the stalwart surrounded by a bunch of young guys trying to figure it out. I think Cade's going to have a big year, but I think Sengun's going to get on he's going to start being part of like a conversation now of like, oh, young guys who are good. I like Sengun.
I think that's an interesting one because by all accounts, Houston spent the summer, like after Ime Udoka gets there and they say, we're going to add veterans who know how to play defense and who can sort of be the, help our young guys grow in the right way. They went hard after Brook Lopez and were ready to, by all accounts, ready. They thought they were very close on that deal to be their new starting center, their backstop, the guy that sort of organizes the entire defense. That doesn't happen. Now, Ime Udoka has to look at Sengun and be like, all right, let's find out. Show me something here. And for any hope of them being you're absolutely right. Like the best that they've looked the last couple of years was running the offense through him and, him being kind of like a baby Jokic, baby Sabonis kind of player. And so if you're going to reap the benefits of that offensively with Fred VanVleet, with Jalen Green, you're also going to need to stop somebody at some point. And so like, this is the minutes are there. Now the opportunity's there. You're going to have to continue to earn them. Cause I get the feeling that Ime Udoka won't suffer in silence if you don't get any stops. I love that I love that as a pick. Moving forward, the best non-verbal taunt in the NBA is?
I mean, it's probably too short, too small, right? I think it's become somewhat ubiquitous. Some might argue that it's maybe overdone, but it's great. It feels like a thing that maybe an overzealous NBA might say, okay, that's a tech if you keep doing this that way. But I like it. They're not letting you like point at a guy and laugh at him after you dunk or after they fall down off of a crossover. Like that's sadly being legislated out of our game. But I think that the too small is great. It's really wonderful.
I love the pick. I am hopeful for a return this year, though, of when Joel Embiid goes down after a basket and end one, a lot more crotch chopping. We haven't seen nearly as much Triple H, Shawn Michaels crotch chopping from Joel in recent years. I need a return to that. Maybe that's a vibes thing. Like it's been a little more dour and dire. Everything feels more pressure packed. I hope for whatever the resolution is in Philly, I hope leads to a lightness of being that results in a lot more making an X over your genitals. And a player who deserves more respect than he gets is?
Gosh, this is tough because I respect every player. I have a high level of respect for everyone who makes an NBA roster. I'm going to say,
I've never heard you call anybody a bum flat out. So I mean, this works out straight for me.
It's certainly not in a number of years on the platforms that I currently work with. I have not done that. Though I'm happy to be proven wrong.
If this results in audio clipping of this, I would be thrilled by that. I was going to let you know I'd be thrilled.
I may listen. You may. I may be confronted with me calling someone a bum, and that very well might happen. Gosh, why don't I pick a Nick? I'm going to say. And again, I don't think it's necessarily that this player has been disrespected, but I think Quentin Grimes is a player that I really thought about as a leap player maybe not maybe not like a dramatic like scoring leap, maybe like a percentage or two on their 3-point shooting percentage, kind of leap, which I think for the Knicks would be immense. But he's a player that has that thing of, there are times when you look like a vet, just like a solid, like a 3-and-D vet who's been doing it a while. And for a young player, I think that's really huge. And I think he is not a player that people talk about outside of Knicks world. And I think can be a really, really important cog in a winning team. Like, can be a really good, solid winning type player.
Yeah, when you talk about players who are like have the potential to be elite point of attack guys, great catch and shoot players, but also have some more, for lack of a better term, to their game, like that can actually beat a closeout, get done. It feels like there's more there. So I think the hope is that this season you will see more opportunities there. My zag here. How about James Harden, guys? He led the league in assists last year. He's arguably like a top 25 kind of guy, and we're out here ready to send him off to China to play in the CBA. Like, I get the why, and maybe it's because in order to get respect, you have to respect yourself and give respect. But listen, James Harden, in a vacuum, which obviously I mentioned this earlier this week, and I wrote about the Sixers. They do not exist in a vacuum. They exist on the hellmouth. But in a vacuum, James Harden, his production merits more respect than it receives outside of the context of an elimination game.
I agree. And I think it speaks to something which is kind of like an irreducible part of life, like a law of nature, kind of like the speed of light that we can't get around, and it's likability. I think people don't like James Harden. And I think that is held against him. We don't like the way people don't like the way he plays, don't like how he accrues his voluminous mountains of points. And don't like the way perhaps that he goes about his business with regards to whatever team he's employed with and doesn't want to be employed with anymore. That being said, he is great, like a historically great. He's historically great. And if he had played the game a little bit, the kind of like meta game, maybe things would be different. But I think a lot of this comes down to the fact that people just are irked by James Harden, which is fine, but he is great. He's a great player. Let me run something by you, Dan, because I think this is an island that I am on alone. And by the time this podcast appears, things might have changed and I might have egg on my face. But I really believe what makes the most sense for all parties in Philadelphia is just figure it out. And James should just stay there. And I think I really believe this. There's a non-zero chance because I think he has to play for them. And so he has to play a little bit to show the league, hey, I'm still that guy that led the league in assists and yada, yada, yada. I think that when that happens, he might look around and say, you know what? I got the MVP here. Daryl Morey and I have walked a journey of many miles together. Maybe we just figure it out. Maybe just stay here and figure it out.
Yeah, I mean, it's so easy to forget because of just how insane the last 5 months have been.
Yeah.
They were up 3-2 on the Celtics in round 2 with 5 minutes left in the fourth quarter of game 6 before everything completely tumbled and caught fire. But there is a pathway here, absolutely, to what, if one or two more things go right, for them to be in the same kind of thing where the Clippers were. They made a conference finals and everyone was like, oh, okay, cool. No, nothing to worry about. It happened. We got there. If all they need to do is that, and if they can get even if they lose in the conference finals, it's like, well, the monkey's off everybody's back, right? The pressure is released. And realistically, I don't know that there's a much better chance of that happening for him in LA than there would be in Philly.
I don't think there is, considering what Daryl Morey would ask back from the Clippers, unless they can involve several other teams who are, have a vested interest in seeing the Clippers all of a sudden get really good. I think that I agree with you. I think that this is the best shot. I think you hope that Maxey gets better. You have the MVP. You have continuity. I think it's a good team if they stick it out and are all engaged.
Well, maybe the real answer is that the player who deserves more respect is Terrence Mann, because apparently he is the absolute drop dead. You cannot trade Terrence Mann.
Yeah.
I will build the altar of my church on the cornerstone that is Terrence Mann. And we'll find out if that continues to be true. The over-under on the number of groin shots handed out by members of the Golden State Warriors is...
Well, it's interesting. I think that Chris has grown out of this as time has gone on. Certainly there are more current nutshot artists kind of like plying the trade. Dylan Brooks.
With a dissenting view, please welcome in our surprise guest, Julius Hodge. And he's going to come in to offer a consenting opinion.
But I'm going to say, for the entire regular season and postseason, I'm going to put it at 5.5. Not that many, but maybe a significant and notable number. And I'm going to put most of those on Dre.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that he might be starting the season injured definitely helps because if he misses time, there's only so many. I was about to say there's only so many people he can hurt if he's not in the game, but we found out that that's not necessarily the case. I mean, this is why I think you would be a great odds maker. That is the line that is right there. It's awesome. It's not so big that it would feel like overwhelming to go on the other side of it, but you feel like any lower than that, you'd be like, you got to take the over on it. And I'm really glad we spent some time working that out. Last one on this part of it, from a conversation that we had with your co-host, Chase Serrano of the wonderful Wondery podcast, Six Trophies. After we stopped recording, the best big man of all time is... And before you answer, as you ponder, he went with a specific era. Like he narrowed it down to like this player between this year and this year. So if you are thinking of like an apex version of that guy, that is a welcome opportunity. It doesn't have to be the entire career.
I'm gonna go Kareem. I think Kareem, for his longevity, for his intellect, for the unstoppableness of the skyhook, I'm going to say Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, who just is an absolute icon, a titan, and I think it says a lot that he had what many call like the most unstoppable weapon in the game ever, the skyhook, and you just don't. Everybody's like, I can't. It's too hard. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to.
I can't even try to learn it. Right.
Yeah, I'm not even going to try. Like people looked at Dirk's one-legger and said, "That's okay. Yeah, I'll do that."
Every dude in the league has it now.
Yeah, good, awesome, great move. Or even like Michael Jordan's, like kind of fadeaway as a guard, or the Euro step, and they go, "That's awesome. I'm putting that in the repertoire." People look at the skyhook and go, "No, I can't do it." And for that, I'm handing it to Kareem.
I mean, also was in a Bruce Lee movie. Hard to argue with that. I'm going to tell you two things that Chase Serrano said after we had that conversation. Or one was, his answer specifically was the 1998 to 2002 version of Shaquille O'Neal. Like the one where it was just like, he's with the Lakers during that three-peat era, ripping people's heads off.
Yeah.
The only argument to be formed against him was that he couldn't make free throws and that he was going to run off Kobe Bryant. Both reasonable things to be upset about, but that was about all you could, the only arrows you could sling at him at that point. So
he didn't like to work out. He didn't like to work out, I guess, was also like a thing.
But even that, like, listen, as a pro labor force, like he got hurt on company time. He's going to rehab on company time.
I can't argue with it. I can't argue at all with it.
It makes perfect sense to me.
It makes very logical.
And the second thing that Shay said that he shared was when I asked him about working with you, he said the reason that he wanted to work with you on this project and many others is because Jason is smarter than me. And I'm going to confirm that because when asked who I would choose, I chose Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. So I agree with you. And we both agree that you are smarter than Shay in this particular context.
No, that's not true. He's probably smart. I'll say one thing about smartness. And this is just a way I like to work in a thing that makes me comfortable. As living a creative life. And I'm sure you'll feel the same way. I get very nervous when I'm in a room with people where I am like, I might be the smartest person in this room. Because then I'm pretty sure whatever we're going to do is not going to be that good. If I'm the smartest, I love being around people who I'm like, damn, that is a smart person.
Oh, yeah.
And this is going to be cool if this team is that smart. And that's how I feel working with Shay. That's how I feel talking to you. I love being around smart people.
Well, that's as we go with the conceit of the show being a self-help podcast about basketball. I love that as an idea. Put yourself in around people that are smarter than you who challenge you. It's a good recommendation, and it brings us to the last bit of the show that we're going to try out this week. A weekly recommendation. Whenever I have a guest on, I'm just going to ask that guest something that you think is cool and good that would enrich the lives of our listeners and viewers. So, Jason, is there something that you can recommend to the people? It doesn't have to be about basketball. Doesn't have to be about online things. We are going to also, doesn't have to be your own podcast. We're going to plug that, I promise you. Something else that you would love to share with the people.
Sure. I mean, as evidenced by the Scylla and Charybdis drop, I've been in a classics kick recently. I'm currently reading Emily Wilson's translation of Homer's The Odyssey. It's wonderful. And poetic. But my recommendation is going to be a good, let's see, what's the one I have? Hold on. Herodotus is The Histories, which is a history of the ancient world written by they call him the father of history, Herodotus, in about 400 something BC, and it covers the famous Greco-Persian War, the Battle of Thermopylae, the famous 300 Spartans, all that stuff. And so my translation is Robin Waterfield's Oxford Classics version. There's others. There's a more recent one by Tom Holland, not the actor. That
would be really freaking impressive.
Yeah, that you might like. It wasn't for me. That said, I found Herodotus to be an incredibly humane and thoughtful writer. There's a passage in here, and I'm gonna mangle it, where he basically is talking. The book is notable for its discursions. Like he'll be talking about like the looming Greco Persian War, and then he'll be like, "Let me talk about Egypt for a little while," and hippos and different things. And he's going on about like various cultures in the Near East, and then he kind of stops and he goes, "You know what?" And he's talking about like their it might have been the Scythians, their particular culture, the way they do things in their society. And he stops and he goes, every society, every culture is going to think that the way they do things is the best. And that's just natural. It may seem strange to us that they do things this way, but that's the way they do it. And we just have to accept that and respect it. And I found that to be an incredible lesson in just being empathetic to the way different cultures live and go about their business. Because, of course, they're going to naturally think that, this is the way we do it, and it's the best. I thought that was a really wonderful insight from thousands of years in the past that remains true today. And otherwise, it's a ripping narrative. Like, if you like, as many people will know, I like sci-fi, I like fantasy books, stuff like that. It has that element of wonder and fantasy, because there's a lot, he's talking about a lot of places that we know more now, but he was just like, had heard stories. Oh yeah, there's hippos with lion's manes down there. There's ants that mine gold, huge ants that mine gold in Ethiopia, all these weird things. So it's got that feel of fantasy, but it's also like rooted in it's real stuff that happened. And it's very clear. There's a wonderful, his work style, Herodotus, is clearly based on, he went to a place and talked to all the people about, what do you know about this event? Just a wonderful writer, a really great narrative, and a fun read. Herodotus, The Histories.
I love that, because I think we often, especially in an age where we are consuming a lot of media, instantly, digitally, and also like maybe with only, like, I read the headline kind of snippets, like, you forget that the things that happen, or we often lose sight of the things that happen, are choices made by people that are made for particular reasons and that come from traditional or particular histories or particular social structures that like inform and influence the way that these decisions get made. Like, that history is not a static thing that just you learn in a book, or then in a textbook. It's like, this is a collective action that was born out of a certain society. So something that's empathetic and humane in that way, I think, is a great lens to put on stuff that could otherwise be seen as like a little bit highfalutin or a little bit, dry. So that's a wonderful recommendation. I'm along that line, in a very simple, sort of smaller way, literally reading any book, anything, read a thing. Because my answer to this was like, I don't know if you are listening to me and watching this or consuming this in some way, you might be irrevocably internet poisoned too, and have a Swiss cheese brain that has been eaten away at by things that just devour your attention bit by bit by bit. And so literally any aspect of reading a thing, and doesn't have to be, I mean, Herodotus is a wonderful recommendation, but recent things like simple stuff. Jack Handey, the guy that wrote Deep Thoughts, wrote sort of short comedy novels. One of those, Neil Gaiman's novella Coraline. These are short things. I'm going like a few pages at a time, plugging away on Lush Life by Richard Price. And it's like, I'm not... Awesome book. Oh, on the shelf there. I would get up to, but I have to go behind the camera and I can't do that. But there it is. Yep. Same edition. I've got that. That's what I'm working through now. And like every time you get through a couple of pages of that or something, it feels a little bit like I'm taking a little bit more control back of my brain and my attention span and my ability to connect to something that's not just moving at this, the speed of light as all the information that whizzes past us every day does. So, and Marshawn Lynch recommended that we protect our chicken and protect our mentals. And I think one way to do that is literally read anything. Maybe it would be useful for you too. Also, now that I've slandered digital media, we know you have enough time in your week for multiple podcasts, and we insist, I demand that you check out, subscribe to 6 Trophies with Jason Concepcion and Shea Serrano. First 2 episodes are already out. It is so fun. It is a conversation with 2 great friends, and you will feel like you have dropped right into a very warm and loving embrace for it. So I must insist you go listen to that. That is going to do it for the first episode of Devine Intervention. Jason, how do you feel after having been the inaugural guest on the show? How do you feel today?
I feel lighter. I feel honored. It's an honor just to appear. Just to be asked to be the first. It's an honor just to come in first. And that's how I feel. Well, honored to have won yet again.
Yeah, I mean, nothing but winning, as you will be doing if you're on the Wondery Media app and you're getting 6 Trophies with Jason Concepcion and Shea Serrano. Thank you so much to Jason Concepcion for taking all this time to be with me and really to be with himself. Thank you to super producer John Gennaro for everything that he does to make the show look and sound great. If you've made it this far and you've hung out with us, please subscribe to Ball Don't Lie on YouTube or whatever platform you currently listen to podcasts. Leave us a 5-star review. It helps us with discoverability and getting new shows like Devine Intervention off the ground. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you again next week. Take care of yourself. You deserve it.